Hello, Internet. It's Jen T. Grace here, founder of Publish Your Purpose Press, and I am here for day number 8 of the 30-day marketing challenge. Your challenge is to double your book sales from last month to this current 30-day period in time. So tip number 8 may require some things that you don't want to tackle. So tip number 8 is that I want you to assess your calls to action. Now, this is a marketing tip. This is a more strategic marketing tip, and it might require you to go back to your previous book and reconfigure a few things. The first thing I want you to do is get a copy of your book. As authors, we all have author copies of our own laying around. I want you to get your book, and I want you to try to remove yourself from the equation for a minute as the author and just pretend you're a reader of your own book. And I want you to go through and I want you to strategically assess, are there calls to action in your book at all? I am shocked on a pretty consistent basis when I pick up a book, mostly nonfiction books, although memoirs have calls to action too. But I am constantly surprised when I pick up a book and I'm loving the author. I am all on board with what you are saying. I want to buy what you are selling. You are amazing. You write so well. This book is amazing. And then I go and look, and there is absolutely no contact information for the person who wrote the book. Occasionally in the copyright page, you might find the business name of the author. Occasionally there might be an email address, there might be a website, but let's be honest, readers are oftentimes lazy. They're not going to go through that extra step to find out how to contact you. So calls to action are more than just contact information. At the very least, at the bare minimum, I want you to flip to the last page of your book or somewhere in the back of your book. Usually it's somewhere around the About the Author page, perhaps. If you have an About the Author page, if you don't, that's something I strongly suggest that you go back and revise and include. So I want you to be thinking about, what's your call to action? What are you asking your reader to do as a result of reading your book? If you're writing nonfiction, this is imperative. And I'm going to get into more elaborate tips over the next 30 days, but I want you to look and just see, do you have your contact information first and foremost? Is there in mine, it would be About Jen, or it could just say About the Author, and it could have, Jen is the founder of Publish Your Purpose Press. To get in touch with her, click here. So in an ebook, you're clicking here. In a print book, you're saying go here. Some calls to action include a QR code. At PYP, we have a number of books that use QR codes where somebody can just pick up their phone, hover over the QR code, and immediately takes them somewhere. So this, I'm talking like basic stuff. Does your reader know how to get in touch with you? Is your company name listed in your author bio? Is your website link listed in your author bio? That is like the basic fundamental. You have to have this. The next layer of this is much more strategic. I want you to be thinking about, how can you engage your reader? If a reader really loves what you're doing and they're really engaged with your topic, they're really excited by whatever new spin on whatever content you created is, they're going to want to know how to engage with you. They might want to know, how do they hire you as a consultant to come into their organization? They might want to hire you as a speaker to come engage their Salesforce or their team or whomever it is that you might be serving. But if you don't let your reader know that you are available for those opportunities, the reader is going to be like, that was a good book, and they're going to move on. This is the challenge in just kind of the age that we're in, is that we are bombarded with content. There is content coming out of every direction. And if we don't make it crystal clear how to get in touch with us as the author, there is no way our reader is going to know how to do that, because they're not going to take the time to take that next step. I don't remember, and I wouldn't tell you the name of the book anyway, but I read a book not that long ago, and I really loved it. And the author had zero information about themselves. They did not have a bio. Their name was listed on the back cover, but there wasn't even a bio on the back cover. There was no photo. I had no clue. I just had a name, and I had the fact that here's the book title and here's the author's name. I, as a reader, could have gone to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Goodreads, somewhere, and could have researched, who is this author? what is their business? How can I engage with them? But am I going to do that? No. And that's me as someone who does this for a living. So the average reader is certainly not going to take that extra time or energy to find out how to contact you. So there's the contact piece, as I said. Then there's the hire me as a consultant, hire me as a trainer, hire me as a speaker. Go listen to my podcast, subscribe to my YouTube channel. All of these things are calls to action. So the call to action is, how do we engage the reader outside of the pages of your book and get them into your marketing funnel for you to eventually be able to sell them something else down the road? Those are the easier calls to action to create, because if you've already published your book, I'm speaking really specifically to self-published authors at the moment. If you've already published your book, you can go back in and add some pages that have these strategic calls to action. There's going to be a cost involved because you're going to have to re-engage with whoever did the typesetting, which is the interior of your book. You're also likely, depending on how many pages you add, you're going to have to adjust the spine of your book to accommodate those new pages. So there's definitely some elements of things that you have to do. So again, this is a much more advanced strategy. But if you don't have a call to action in your book, you are shooting yourself in the foot in terms of getting any further engagement with your readers. So if your book is to drive your business, to drive consulting, to drive speaking without a call to action, your book is essentially useless. And I'm being really blunt and rough right now, but it's truly somewhat useless without a proper call to action. In regards to memoir, it's really important for memoir too, especially if you're speaking on the topic that you've written your memoir about. So again, what are those calls to action? Same thing. At a bare minimum, I want you to have contact information and make it clear. What I would really love for you to do, if you're going through the headache and hassle of updating your book to begin with, what I would really love to see you do is be very intentional about it. Do you have calls to action maybe at the end of every chapter? Do you have calls to action that are woven throughout the content of your book? This is definitely far more complicated for someone who already has a book out, because now we're talking about updating many different pages, not just adding a couple pages on the end of the book or in the beginning of the book. Those are easier from a structural standpoint to just kind of add. When we're talking about weaving them in, that's a whole different can of worms. But it's probably a can of worms that is worth opening. And I know that you might be watching this and cringing at the thought of going back to your book to making any updates to it, because we all get to that place. I call it author fatigue, where we get to that place with our book where we are so fed up with it that we never want to read it again. We never want to look at it again. We are happy and we're joyful and gleeful to be like, hey, go buy my books, here, give your book away for free, all of those things. But the mere thought of having to go back and make an update to it, I know could be sending shivers down your spine. But good books really know how to engage the reader. The next thing that I will add to this is I read a book about accounting not that long ago. It was a gift from somebody. It was an amazing book. It was really, really good. And I'm not gonna, because about what I'm gonna say now, I'm not gonna tell you the name of it. So it was great. And it had the most beautiful calls to action, so woven throughout the entire book from start to finish. It would be things like, if you're, if you need a template for this thing that we're talking about cost of goods sold. Do you need a template for this? Great, go to my website, get the template. And then all you had to do is go to the website and get the template. What did that make me do? It got me out of the author's book, it got me onto their website, and it got me into their marketing funnel for them to eventually sell me something else. I was a primed and ready and waiting to purchase reader of what does this author have next. Two downsides to this, and we will get to more details in a later tip. Number one downside is the user experience was atrocious. So this had 14 separate calls to action throughout the entire book that were so beautifully and seamlessly woven in that you would never know as an outsider that the author was intentionally trying to lure you in to their marketing funnel, and it was flawless. I could not recommend a better way of doing it. However, when I went to their website, I had to enter my information 14 separate times. So every call to action that was throughout the book, I then had to go and select that call to action and give them my name, my email address, my phone number, and for whatever reason they wanted my mailing address. Every single time I had to put that information in. And it's exhausting, but the templates that they were providing to me were worth the pain in the ass of going in and doing these 14 things over and over and over again. The good user experience would have been like, hey, here is my author website. It's password protected. It, requires an email address to get into, whatever it might be. That's the way to do it. And then you go in and all of the resources are listed out on your website, ready, available. You can download whichever ones you want. You don't have to download them all. It would have been beautiful and flawless. So the user experience was atrocious. The second problem with it is that there was no follow-up. So we're going to talk about follow-up sequences and autoresponders in a later tip. I'm trying to intersperse these tips to be like today's, we're over 10 minutes already. It's a much more difficult tip to tackle. And then tomorrow I'll do something a little bit lighter. But at a later date, I'm going to do a tip about follow-up sequences, autoresponders, whatever you want to call them. And that is how do you engage with your reader, your buyer, whomever it is, after they've gotten on your mailing list. So for me, I went through the painstaking hassle, and trouble of getting my 14 different templates that I wanted. And I'm now in their system and I never got a follow-up email. Not a single one, not a single email, not a thank you for downloading this template. Thank you for reading this book. There was literally nothing. And I was a primed customer who would have bought something had it been offered to me because their book was so valuable from an accounting standpoint. It was so helpful to figure out how to run my numbers in a different way that if they said, hey, I have this online training, it's $50, I would have been like, sign me up. I trust this author. I know they know their stuff. They gave me the value of these templates. All I had to do, and this book happened to be a gift, but all I had to do is spend $15 on this book. And now I have all of these templates to save me hours upon hours of time. That was such a missed opportunity. So I will get into that at a later point in time, because if you have calls to action that are in your book now, I will tell you how to leverage them in a much more strategic way in a different tip. But today's tip is to assess your calls to action. And I apologize in advance if just the mere thought of doing this and going back and revising and editing your already published book makes you cringe and sends shivers down your spine. I'm sorry. But without it, you may as well not be expecting any business at all, because you just have to be really strategic and mindful of how you're doing this. So that's today's tip, a little bit longer, far more strategic than the previous tips at this point, but that's where we're at today. Tip number 8, assess your calls to action. So that's today's tip. I will be back with you tomorrow for tip number 9, where I will make it a little bit more digestible for you to execute upon. Until then, have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you later.